Goðan, daginn, herslingar, and welcome to episode 14 of Silph Thyme. I am Thithrecker, and with me always is our host.
Hi, this is Zacharias, back again. Today we're going to be welcoming RyanSwag.
Everyone's favorite IV plumber. So, welcome on to the podcast. Thank you so much for making the time to come out and hang out with us and just talk about Pokemon Go IVs.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
So, first, before we jump into all the fun, as is tradition, I have produced a marvelous piece of art here to thank you for your time. And we'll just slip this up, and there you go.
Oh gosh. Beautiful.
A beautiful piece of artwork right there for you. Dedenne, the antenna Pokemon. Listen, no one has made more waves for Dedenne than you have. And you make great cases for him every time. So I always catch mine and just check the IVs and keep them stored in the back. I don't think I have been confident enough to play him in Open Great League. I definitely use him a lot in limited metas. But it's a super fun Pokemon, and definitely I think your signature one. Taking you to new heights, as we can see in this beautiful artwork, which I'll send you in Discord after, in Twitter afterwards. Alrighty, so thank you so much for that. So let's just start by introducing who you are. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for those 3 people living under a rock playing competitive Pokemon Go that don't know you?
You'd actually be surprised how many, I guess, more casual players don't know me, as I'm finding out going to play Pokemon challenges. But for those of you underneath the rock, time has come for you to learn about PVP IVs and about the man that controls them all, me, RyanSwag, aka SwagTips. Um, yeah, I'm a writer for Game Press, and I got a YouTube channel called SwagTips where I kind of break down more complicated aspects of Pokemon Go.
And we will link those directly below. Obviously, go check out his channel. The IV dives are amazing, and you should watch them all, but you can obviously search for your preferred Pokemon and use that as a starting point for your team building. Fantastic videos, excellent deep dives, really gets into the meat and the nitty gritty of every individual Pokemon. So let's just start with what got you playing Pokemon Go.
I grew up with Pokemon, and like end of high school, early college, I got into the VGCs a bit. And so I've always been, into Pokemon, into competitive Pokemon. And then once I got more like deep into school and work and stuff like that, I didn't have time for, competitive Pokemon anymore. So Pokemon Go kind of came out at that perfect time where it's like, I've got nothing to do with my life. I've got a couple hobbies, but nothing really taking up my time. And then Pokemon Go is like Pokemon in the real world. And I got crazy about it pretty quick. So yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of players kind of migrated because it's like, do you have time to breed 900 of the same Pokemon to get the IV distribution you need before EV training them? Or with a legendary, soft resetting your game, or full resetting the game with Scarlet Violet, which was a nightmare for VGC players, which I thankfully am not anymore. But yeah, so I mean, it's reasonable. Pokemon Go, you feel a little more productive when you're doing it because you're at least walking around, you're getting some exercise, you're enjoying nature. Uh, they're great communities, they're fun people. And then competitive Pokemon Go came out. I think the scene's come a long way in the years that it's been out. So, what specifically got you focused on doing these really deep dives on all of the stats products of Pokemon?
Yeah. It kind of started when I got into Silph. So when Silph season 1 happened, I was kind of finishing up my nursing degree, so I really wasn't able to participate that much. So I went pretty hard on Silph season 2 when I was like finally done with school. And so I do these like meta simplified guides at the time
Mm-hmm.
because the Silph metas would be concentrated on like maybe 15 Pokemon that are even halfway decent. And then of those 15, like 3 would be really, really good. So with those 3 targets in mind, I started to notice that there was some, variance in the matchups depending on what your IVs were. Back in this Stone Age era, PV Poke didn't really have a easy way to identify breakpoints. Like right now, it's like completely different to how it was
Right.
back then.
Yeah.
It's so easy to find
Mm.
breakpoints now. I remember I'd have like spreadsheets where I'd just be like going back and forth with different IV spreads to find out like when the move would change by 1 damage. But yeah, so in these concentrated metas, it was pretty easy to pick out like here are the three big dogs, and then here are these like stat spreads that could beat them. And if you could take advantage of that, you could have like a completely different experience, in these limited metas. And so I kind of carried that forward when GBL happened. So there was the Open Great League meta and the GBL styles of battles. And that was like a new kind of challenge because it was a much wider meta. Like, how do
Hmm.
you account for everything? Where with the Silph metas, it was like there's only like two or three things you're really worried about. But yeah, I just kept adapting with that and finding new ways to, kind of highlight what's important as far as the stats go. And like one part of it is that like I got pretty good at it, so it's like why not double down on this, have that be kind of like my niche because I notice like a lot of people don't really talk about PvP IVs that much, let alone to the extent that I do. I know a lot of creators and a lot of competitive players know about PvP IVs and they take advantage of them. But if they're on like a faction or something like that, well, they have a lot of incentives to kind of keep that to themselves, where
Yeah.
me, I'm kind of free rolling. I ain't got no faction. I don't have a teammate. I don't really have a leaderboard I'm trying to climb here. So I don't mind being that like info guru. And then another part of it too is that I don't have a lot of time to play Pokemon Go. And throughout my life, I haven't really lived in a Pogo ideal kind of area. So the IV spreads that I personally have to work with are usually pretty limited.
Hmm.
Like the resources I have are pretty limited. So it's like, sure, following like high stat product rank one, that can get you so far. But if you have nothing that's anywhere near rank one, well, you got to kind of figure out which of these goofy IV spreads are going to be doing it better. And if you have knowledge of breakpoints, you know that some IVs are going to be doing it a whole lot better than other ones. So I kind of got into it to help me perform better. And then at the same time, I'm like with it and I double down on it because, well, I guess nobody else is doing this kind of information, or at least not to this level.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think anyone is near to competing at the level of stat breakdowns you do. And it's not because it's not valuable. It's because you just do such a thorough job that it's like, why would I make a video that's the same thing or shorter? Because you do a really, really good job of breaking it down. And I love when you talk about different types of Pokemon, right? Greninja was one of these ones where it's super glassy, so you can build it to do this or this, and you like to give here's the bare minimum you need for it to be a successful Pokemon, which is really great. I looked a lot at that for Guzzlord because obviously you have to roll it terribly, quote unquote, IV wise, they need to be low with low friendships. And what are like how many Guzzlord trades can you do, right? I've done 37 Cresselia trades and still looking for my proper one. Um, but that's compared to I've done 148 Carbink trades, mostly for the XL candy with other Carbinks. But it's a lot easier with those, whereas especially with the legendary Pokemon, especially in Great League, knowing the bare minimums breakpoints that you point out really I find to be the most helpful for me. So let us in on the secret now. What has been your most shocking discovery when you've been IV diving? Which one were you just baffled that actually works?
Um, I think my favorite one that was pretty wacky, and then like the more I looked into it, like the more real it was, is probably the Swagafty, as I call it, the goofy high attack weight Scrafty. I'd say in today's meta, it's not nearly as valuable as it was back when I first found it. Um, but it's like I can't remember what the specifics are to it, but it's like you got a really high attack weight and then like not a whole lot of defense and then just like a little schniblet of HP. And because of this attack weight, you get these like post power up punch breakpoints.
Mm,
And then a big thing at the time too was getting charge move priority on Shadow Nidoqueen, which was
right.
just absolutely ridiculous. And so like when I was first doing the deep dive, I was like kind of noticing this trend here And then when I was like kind of refining it, I was like, dang, like wacky high attack Scrafty kind of has it going on. And then like I think like I don't know, 4, 5 months later or something, somebody on Reddit did this like automated like volume method where it was like they kind of did like a add and compare on the PvPoke matrix,
Hmm.
but they did it for like all 4096 IV spreads against like the meta. And they did one for Scrafty. And like the conclusion for my deep dive was if you're going to build Scrafty, you either want to have like super crazy high stat product or you want to have this wacky attack thing going on. And the results from that also backed up like that this wacky attack weight was somehow like neck and neck with like the rank one. And I was like, there it is. There's the Swagafty just wrecking people. I don't know. It's so bad, but it's so good at the same
No,
time.
yeah, I mean, that's phenomenal. I love when you win CMPs you're not supposed to. When these, I have a 15 attack, like 0 defense, 2 HP Wigglytuff that just as long as you don't throw a charge move can like before the charm nerf would just brute force its way through. Because the charm damage was so insanely high on it with the breakpoints, and it's always really fun when you find these what feel like counterintuitive.
Oh yeah, just to add on to that, just reminiscing, I have a pretty bad IV Cophagrigus that I used to hit Legend a few seasons back, and like the attack weight isn't anything I'd ever like recommend to anyone because like high bulk Cophagrigus has so many different advantages, but I didn't really have any good ones to work with. And I think it was like around this time last year too. So it's like, am I gonna build like a not that great bulk one and then just rebuild it in like a month when I get a better IV, hopefully? Um, but I noticed that this high attack weight one I had could get charge move priority on wall rain. So I figured, shoot, I may as well build this one, and it only cost me like X amount of Stardust. Like it wasn't that big of a deal. And if I build a second one, then I got this attack weighted one. And then if I build the second one, it'll be my bulk weighted one. And that was the meta where like wall rain was everywhere. And so many wall rains on my path to legend were just going up this charge move priority. They could have KO'd me sooner, but they wanted to get that extra farm in and then get the charge move priority. So what I thought was going to be like this niche thing that would maybe come up every once in a while ended up like paving the way to my victory because like all of them were going to CMP and then losing it, and it was just so dumb. Uh, I love that Cophagrigus.
Very nice. That's exactly what you want.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And man, I there have been many games where you're like, how am I losing CMP here? And you're like, okay, they're running a trash IV Pokemon, and I'm going to lose because of it. But it's also like very, especially when we have best of threes, like in play Pokemon tournaments, where you have to adjust to that, and it makes a big difference. Obviously, we saw that a lot with Metacham Mirror, which was all over, is still all over the place. Metacham only got better because they nerfed his counters, and Psychic Nerf doesn't really do anything to it, I think, mostly. But so adjusting to that is always really important. And yeah, irregular IVs that do unique things, especially in blind Open Great League or Go Battle League, I mean, I think really can help you because people are so used to, all right, I count to 8 and then I throw because I know we
Hmm.
CMP.
And it's super satisfying to catch people out on stuff like that.
There's nothing more
Oh yeah.
satisfying than when they think they've won, and you win CMP, and you just see it. Like I love when you're throwing your charge move, you're spinning your circles or whatever, and you just see the little rewards pop up in the bottom right, and you know they top lefted because they lost CMP. Oh, it feels so good. Uh, inject that into my veins. It feels amazing.
I wonder how many cell phones are snapped in half are you know man, I can't think of how to phrase this.
Yeah, how many
Like
people have? How many walls have
how
been
many people have
dented?
like just lost their
Yeah.
minds because of the Swagafty? Like going to charge move priority with your Nido Queen, it's a Scrafty. You never lose CMP, and then you do.
It's like I've done this matchup 100 times. How in the world am I? And then most of the time we're like, "Oh, Niantic made me lag," and you're like, "No, it's actually working as intended," and I won.
Yeah, I got a quick little story with that
Go
too.
for it.
So I had a buddy up by me who was going to college up here. Now he's graduated. He moved back to his home state, so I never see him again. But he said that in Silph Season 1 and Silph Season 2, he had the maximum HP Altaria. And with that one extra HP, you're able to consistently beat Altaria in the mirror because like you just survive the Dragon Breath damage by one, you know? And he said that like in Silph Season 1, there were so many like resets and disputes that he would just automatically win the dispute because he had that one extra HP and nobody would expect that to happen. Because if you don't know about it, then you don't know that it's gonna happen, then it
Right.
happens. So surely it was lag knocking you down like a fast move or two, but it turns out that my boy Jacob has the maximum HP freaking Altaria. Disgusting.
Yeah, I mean that's why we do this. Now, I caveat here for everyone listening. One, don't think that if you don't spend this much time looking at breakpoints, you can't climb, you can't make legends, you can't do wonderful things. Um, but the times when it matters, it feels amazing when you live on 1 HP or when you win the CMP. And so that's why we really kind of break those down. And I've said this a dozen times. One, I only run 1500 CP Pokemon. Two, no one should do that. It's a terrible idea. But it's just, I started that way, and my OCD makes me continue that way, which really narrows down the IV spreads I can find. Um, but for everyone who's sane out there, we're going to kind of talk about now, where do you start if you're determined, right? I need to make this Pokemon work, right? Skeledirge. I want to have the best Skeledirge out there ever, and I need it to beat Steelix. I don't know if it can or not. I know I beat one last night, but that's because they didn't shield the Shadow Ball. I don't know in the standards. I haven't done the number crunches on Skeledirge because I don't really like Incinerate as a fast move. Now that people are move denying, it feels just like you're guaranteed for them to get 2 seconds in on your 5 second move, whether that's 4 or 2 fast attacks. So, despite me loving Macargo, I'm moving away from 5 turn fast moves for that reason. But find the Pokemon you like. What's the best way to start? So, what's your approach here when you start doing a deep dive to find the best Pokemon of its sort?
So I think the way I go about it for a deep dive isn't really practical for somebody trying to figure out stuff on their own. Because like my approach to it is I'm trying to create this like tell-all guide that
Mm-hmm.
covers every kind of base. If you're just getting started with PvP IVs, then I think it'd probably be best to just use like the PV Poke Matrix
Yep.
and then plug in the rank one and then plug in the IV spreads that you actually have to work with, and then just run the results against the PV poke meta, using both like the default and then the high stat product variations, and then just check out what's happening in each of the different kind of shield scenarios. And then when it comes to like matchup changes, then like investigate why those matchups are changing, like how realistic is it for these matchup changes to happen, both like positive and negative. And then from there you can kind of boil down like what your like best option that you have to work with is, or maybe you want to hold off a little bit depending on the species. Maybe it's like super expensive to build a big XL Pokemon. Maybe they'll like give you enough red flags where you're like, maybe I should chill out until I get a better ranked one, or until RyanSwag does a deep dive and tells me which ones I should look out for or something. Um, but yeah, so just plug in what you got, compare it to the rank one in the PV Poke Matrix, and then I guess generally like whichever ones are getting the most wins, that's pretty good. And then but the next step is like kind of finding out why those matchup changes are happening, which PV Poke spells out for us pretty nicely.
I feel personally attacked with my 3 1500 Lickitungs here. Because I built the first one because XLs were hard and it was a lucky, so I was like, great, it'll work. And I was like, these IVs are terrible. So I got a better one and I built it because it was good enough. It was hitting some good spots, and it was catch cup. And I was like, all right, well, I need to build a better one anyways. I guess I'll use this. And then immediately the next day, I caught like a rank 5, one of those perfect has to be best buddied, hits the lick break point, amazing Lickitung. And I was like, I have spent 600 XL candy on Lickitung.
Oh God.
And
Where do you get that
900
XL candy?
lots of trading, lots of walking. And like the two lucky ones that I powered up, they're only like level 45. So they kind of miss like when the XL candy cost goes insanely high. But the final one, it took me another like 8 months to make after I made the second one, even though I got it the day after. And it was devastating. It was awful. So yes, definitely for high XL cost Pokemon like Carbink, I think is the new hotness for XLs, in Great League at least. Definitely check to make sure it's worth the investment, and you're not going to be replacing it a month or two down the road because you just got one that meets all of your actual needs.
The amount of Pokemon I have saved up going, one day RyanSwag will make a video. One day.
All right, what do we need to? He's on the show. What do we need to bully him into deep diving now? What's
Yeah,
the plan
yeah,
here?
exactly.
Buckle on up for the Vileplume PvP IV deep dive.
That's
Yeah.
perfect. And I
I
listen.
I took
I'm
Victory
on
Bell.
this Helio. Yeah, Victory Bell. I think probably is. It's coming back in because of Steelix as well in meta. I'm all in on this Heliolisk train. Let me tell you.
Oh yeah.
Breaking Swipe is a silly move. Lots of people are trying to return to Ghosts, so Heliolisk is doing great against them as well as all of the waters that are showing up. There's something there. I'm saying. So when you're doing this, what what stats do you find perhaps the most valuable? Is it a damage breakpoint, or is it a defense breakpoint, or is it an HP breakpoint? Which one do you find usually is the most helpful in a Pokemon?
Oh man, it really varies species to species. I guess like when it comes to slower fast moves like Volt Switch or like Bubble, like anything that's like 3 turn or higher, usually the fast move breakpoint isn't that big of a deal. Like charge move priority could be a thing, and that's why you'd want some attack. But if they got that slower fast move, then typically I find the attack breakpoint usually doesn't matter for them because it just increases the damage by 1.
Right.
So if you're only doing, I don't know, 6 or 8 extra damage off of that, not a big deal. But if you got like Altaria, for instance, doing 1 extra damage, well, all of a sudden that's like 40 extra damage, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, so then after that point, then so if they got like the slower attack, then usually it comes down to seeing if like a higher defense weight offers something compared to the rank 1. So it's like if you got Lantern, for instance, we found that like the 0, 15, 10 like drastically can outperform the rank 1 because it's got that higher defense stat. So yeah, the defense breakpoints usually come in pretty good. But some Pokemon don't really have any pressing defense breakpoints. So where do you go from there? Well, then you look at maximizing the HP or whatever you can get out of the attack. So yeah, it varies species to species, for sure. It's kind of hard to drop a pin on which one of the 3 stats is the most important.
Yeah. That makes good sense. My Galarian Stunfisk is a 5/14/5, which means that it does 4 damage on Mud Shot. So it hits that little attack breakpoint, which wins it the mirror and makes it more solid in Registeel. And the super high defense made it survive the Focus Blast well enough to not need to shield. Is kind of how I broke it down. And so it's a very bizarre stat distribution there, where getting that extra fast move damage / it's an extra like 3 or something on Earthquake, I forget, plus that really high defense stat was more valuable than a few extra HP here or there for it. And then there may not be a good answer for this one, but we're kind of running numbers. This is kind of the old engineering joke of spherical cows in a vacuum. I don't know if you've heard that one, where it's basically like, no, we didn't figure out the problem you asked, but in this perfect ideal situation that never happens, it works every time. And
Oh.
so here, one second. I'm just going to get the joke and it'll be funnier.
The spherical cows.
Yeah, I think it's you ask a mathematician, an engineer, and a scientist how to like keep cows in a field, and the engineer goes away and draws up a really nice fence, and the mathematician goes away and says, well, if you build boundaries that are exactly this ratio, then foxes and stuff can't jump over them. And the scientist or the physicist says, well, I wasn't able to give you an answer, but for a spherical cow in a vacuum, like just simplifying until the first principles actually works.
Yeah, no,
Scientist jokes aside.
Yeah, I love that joke, first of all, because I've worked with enough scientists that it's like, yeah, if we just remove every variable, we can guarantee this answer every time. And
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
acting like Go Battle League works perfectly every time, or intended
Now I
every
feel
time.
personally attacked.
uh, that's our goal. We have to get personal attacks on everyone this episode.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah,
the plan.
yeah.
So when you're giving us these deep dives, how can you kind of account for inconsistent swaps, right? There's that metachamp bug now where it's not doing damage on a counter after a swap. I think Though Technical just posted about that on Twitter. There's all sorts of, if people are really good at move denial, how, like, you're all, like I said, with a 5-turn fast move, if someone's using a 2-turn or a 1-turn fast move, they're always going to get a bunch of free fast moves in. Do you calculate that or try and account for those things when you're doing these dives?
Yeah. So things have been pretty consistent, I'd say, over the past year-ish. I guess I'm not too familiar with the new hotness as far as like swap denials go, but I've definitely been feeling the burn whenever I like store up a charge move for like the late game. And then I come in after my opponent knocked out a Pokemon and I click the charge move button, but I'm already knocked out. And it's like, what gives, man? Come on. So
Sometimes there's a 1-turn delay, sometimes there's no delay.
but I know during the 2022 season of the Play Pokemon circuit, we were kind of plagued with the whole sneak denial situation. And it was like, it was such a thing where it was like, you had to just accept the fact that sneaks and denials were going to happen. And you can't really argue too much against it because it's just game state, I believe. I'm not like a professor here. I'm not a judge or anything because I don't know the mechanics that well because it just seems to always be changing as far as like what's a glitch, what's actually a thing. But I remember back in that era, I would try to account for sneaks and denials. So it was like if you have this amount of like attack, you could still knock out your opponent in like the 0-1 safe swap or counter swap scenario, even if you get denied a fast move kind of thing. But these days I feel like things have been consistent enough where I don't have to think about that too much. And hopefully whatever issue we're having now gets resolved so I don't have to start worrying about it again.
It's like if you
Uh
swap in, expect to lose this. Yeah.
yeah.
For the most part, it's just been weak connection, which is wildly inconsistent when it shows up. That has been affecting me, at least personally.
But I guess one thing I do account for that's not glitch related, but is kind of down that same pathway is when you do have like a safe swap Pokemon or a counter swap Pokemon, I try to account for, how many extra fast moves they got in before you counter swapped. So
Right.
in some of my deep dives, it's like, hey, if you got this attack break point, then you got 2 whole turns of fast move, or I guess 4 turns of 2-turn fast moves. Anyways, you got 2 fast moves worth of wiggle room to counter swap this thing. Where if you didn't have the attack break point, you have to swap like immediately, or congratulations, your counter swap is. So so there has been some like little tech like that I incorporate.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, especially I think specifically um, with Sableye and Frostlass, in my experience, right? Those Mons just run wild. If they get a 1, 2, or 3 fast move lead, it's like, all right, they will flip most non hard wall matchups, which is why they're such good safe swaps. Um, so knowing the wiggle room for that is definitely really helpful. I remember we were talking with Lurgan Rocket about last year, the 2022-23, or sort of the first Worlds, where he got counter swapped and he stayed in, and everyone was like, I'm not sure why he stayed in. And he's like, well, I was too slow when he first swapped in, so I knew I wasn't going to outpace him to the first charge move. So I figured I would be better off to bank energy there and hope that that would come back to pay it off for me in the end, because it was lost otherwise. And having the presence of mind to think that in the middle of my tap fest is more than I think I can commit to. But it's definitely what these top level players are regularly doing, is that quick math of how quickly do I need to swap in? Can I afford to get 2 more fast moves on this Pokemon before swapping? Because that energy could flip the game at the end. So I think that's really great that you include those things in your deep dives for sure. So speaking of worlds, we just recently had our world champion Axon crowned. An amazing run, amazing Pokemon, and you did a fantastic breakdown of his unique IV spreads, because he posted them all on Twitter, and specifically his Metacham. So do you want to talk a little bit about this new counter espionage system we seem to be building in Show 6 metas?
Yeah. So Metacham has an attack breakpoint for the mirror, which means that it also has a defense breakpoint for the mirror. And if you're able to get both the attack breakpoint on your opponents and the defense breakpoint against your opponents, then that can give you a pretty huge advantage. And this kind of concept exists for a lot of species, like what you found with Galarian Stunfisk. There's the Mirror Slayer build. I actually use a Mirror Slayer G-Fisk myself. And what was it? Trevenant also has that going on too, to the point where everybody, I think, unanimously agrees that the 0-15-6 is like the only Trevenant you want to use in Great League. But yeah, so Metacham also has this mirror break point. And like roughly 2 years ago, I think it's been under 2 years, but I did a Metacham PVP IV deep dive. And in there I touch on the Metacham mirror matchup, but at the time, like Metacham wasn't as wacky dominant as it is now, which is kind of hard to believe in a way, because Metacham has always been present in the meta. But the Metacham mirror matchup hasn't been nearly as common as it has been for like the past, I don't know, 6 months or so. But I touched on the mirror matchup situation, and the problem with it is that you start to drop a bunch of HP, and dropping that HP causes you to lose a handful of other matchups with Metacham, where if you just had that 1 more HP, you'd get that Ice Punch. So it's like, hey, here's some light information on that mirror matchup. If you want to go deeper, this rabbit hole can go wacky deep. And so with the mirror matchup becoming more common, and then especially with its Axon, winning worlds with his mirror slaying Metacham, I decided to be like, all right, so let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's go all the way to the bottom of the rabbit hole and see what we can do for these mirror slayers. So I just kind of refined and broke down like what stat ranges you'll want to look for if you want to try to be a mirror slayer. And then in doing that, I found that you could go even wackier with it and build a high attack, high HP, low defense Metacham to like beat the other mirror slayers. But in doing so, you lose against like bulkier Metacham. So it creates this weird Metacham IV RPS that you don't really have to worry about too much. Like I'd say the Slayer, like the low defense ones, that's some like spherical cows in a vacuum kind of nonsense, a proof of concept. But when it comes to just plain old mirror slayer, it's like you're mostly concerned about the high bulk ones and reasonably attack weighted ones, not other mirror slayers. But yeah, so I tried to like spell that all out for people, and I don't know, make it less esoteric, like its Axon has this sacred IV spread that defeat every Metacham ever. It's like, well, it's not just this one IV spread. There's like, I don't know how many I came up with, like 20, 30 IV spreads that could do this job. And like some IV spreads will have more of an advantage or more of a disadvantage depending on circumstances, and just kind of like make it more clear cut for people.
Yeah, and that's fascinating. That's one of the problems that I think we're beginning to encounter is the stark difference between Pokemon Go and the main series games, right? Because if you talk to big VGC players, they love their Excel spreadsheets as much as you with EV management. How can I make sure that I definitely outspeed this Pokemon, but not so many investments that I lose the HP that I can't tank a Shadow Ball. And so the main series games have always been huge in IV EV management, but they've got tools like breeding and training and vitamins to fix all these things. Where in Pokemon Go, it's like, well, go catch another 1,000 Metatites and hope that one of them is these 30 specific spreads. And many of them you can't trade for if you've been friends with the only people that play in your town, because as soon as you break that 5 IV minimum on attack, you're not going to get the ones we need. You mentioned you're not in one of these ideal Pokemon Go locations. I'm obviously in Southwest Florida, where I similarly don't have super dense places to catch and don't have a ton of players to freshly trade with. Do you find this being a frustrating problem?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I don't know. Not a day goes by where I question when I should stop being friends with my wife for a couple months to maybe help me out a little bit. But
There's the blackmail quip to upload to Twitter. I wonder when I should stop being friends with my wife. Got it.
competitive Pokemon Go's going too deep.
It's
It's only temporary though. Like we can be friends again in approximately like 3 months or whatever.
perfect.
uh, but yeah, the IV situation can be really frustrating sometimes. And I think one thing that kind of like digs at my side a little bit with it too is that people have like maps. Like on Discord, there'll be bot accounts that like will tell you where specific IV spawns are and stuff. And I was at an anime convention last year, and somebody showed me like how they have maps for their town, and they can even like customize what IV spreads that they're looking for. It's not just like the high rank stuff. So they're like, yeah, I got like a swag filter for mine, and I'm like, oh man, I wish I had one of those. So I think there is like a disparity between like the haves and have-nots, not just in like the density of Pokemon and the amount of Pokemon that you can capture, but also like, do you live in a city that has these scanners that can direct you to the most bespoke PvP IV spread ever, or do you not have that? And then also there's multi-accounting, and some people do like account sharing so they can trade from like, I don't know, across the country with a friend or something if they log into their account. So there's like all these different alternative avenues for people to attempt to kind of get around this IV system. But the vast majority of them aren't really accessible to, you know, the majority of players. So where you got the VGCs, people hack their Pokemon, and anybody can hack their Pokemon in VGCs. It's not like this exclusive, you have to live in this specific city to hack your Pokemon kind of thing. Everybody has that even playing field. So for Go, it can be a little bit frustrating where it's like, man, I just need one of these 20 IV spreads, and it was the spotlight hour, and John Hankey hates me, man, because it was cloudy, and there wasn't a freaking cloud in the sky, but of course it was cloudy, so I couldn't even get the IV spreads I was looking for. And then I found somebody on Discord willing to trade, and we did like 40 trades at zero or like good friend floor. And of course, I didn't get it there either. So I guess I'm kind of boned on that one. So yeah, no, it can be a frustrating kind of situation. I'd say when it comes to regionals, there have definitely been Pokemon that I didn't bring because I knew that their IVs would probably cause me problems because I didn't get one that I wanted.
Yeah, that was my regionals account. She was like, "Oh, I could use." Nope, never mind. My IV spread makes me lose these three key matchups when it's supposed to win them. Like I've been hunting a Mantine with good IVs for like 2 years now, and of course mine's even narrower because I have to run a 1500 because I'm stupid. Um, but every time they spawn, I am just catching them all, trading them all, and I like the best Mantine I have, which is not even terrible IVs. I'm pulling it up right now. Um, is after over 250 trades, my best Mantine is a 598. and it still misses key breakpoints. Like the top IV Manteens could beat Galarian Stunfisk back when it was running Bubble Beam. You just need to shield the first one, and then your bulk and your debuffs will carry you all the way through. And I was like, oh, I think I could really make Mantine work. And I was just like, nope, my Mantine loses these key matchups that I needed to be able to flexibly handle as a safe swap. So it's frustrating. So clearly what you're advocating is all of us to start hacking our Pokemon. I think that's what I got from your discussion. But no,
Yeah, I can't even hack my Pokemon.
And
but
unfriend
it's
your
really
love
frustrating.
of that's it.
Then it's like, I said, go out and catch 1,000 Metatites, but then there are people in insert big city here that their Discord just sends up a ping and it's like, the Pokemon you want is ready 15 minutes away. And you just go pick it up and it costs you no time to get this perfect IV spread. And I don't fault them for doing it because you want to win at Pokemon Go, and it's not like hacking the Pokemon Go game is very different than just like, it'd be if my buddy called me up and was like, hey, I just found a double here. It's 1:15:11. You should come out and get it. And I did. It's functionally the same thing. So I'd be wary to say that there's anything wrong going on there, but it's frustrating for those of us that can't do it, for sure.
Yeah. But I guess despite that, you still can compete and you can still do well, despite these disadvantages. But I think it would just be a lot more inviting if it wasn't such a complicated thing for newcomers to get involved with. Because it's like, not only do newcomers have to learn all these different basics, but, then comes the dark day they realize that their Azumarill is trash because it has such a low defense stat that Altaria gets a breakpoint on it. And it's like, gosh, I wish I knew about this sooner. How do I fix this? And it's like, well, you just gotta build another Azumarill, I guess. There's no way around this, buddy. And then it's like, well, Azumarills aren't spawning, so when's the next spawn event for it, I guess? You're just like, it's like just constantly like waiting and hoping, and then also hoping the weather cooperates too. It's just, I don't know. I hope one day they add something similar to the main series games to help people touch up their IV spreads.
Yeah,
absolutely. No. Amen.
I run tournaments here locally, and we get a lot of new players regularly, a lot of younger players, and they're very excited. And they're like, "Oh, look, I've got a 100 IV whatever that I'm running." I'm like, I don't want to tell you this, but that's a terrible Pokemon to run. You've lost 6 levels of valuable stats by running a Hundo, and it's like it's so hard to get them to understand. It's like attack stat is really generally very bad because of how much of the allowed CP that it eats up. And so, yeah, I mean, we've been asking for bottle caps for a long time. Just anything that would help us try for PvP, try and fix these IVs for newcomers especially. It's just very hard on them. Because even if they have the right Pokemon, if they're running terrible IVs and you're running great IVs, like I flipped a dozen Noctowl matchups because I've got a great Medicham and they're just running they're like, oh, high attack on Noctowl is what I want. And I'm like, all right, well, Ice Punch, and I win. So, but obviously, as we're all big IV nerds here and we love these things, we're talking about how they can make a huge difference. But I think you hit the nail on the head. Don't let any of that stop you all from playing. I have won many games with terrible IV Pokemon. I think I ran an entire season of factions with a 11-5-11 Barbaracle, which just absolutely needs defense, and it didn't have it. But you just know the neutral matchups you're going to lose, and you kind of play around it if you know what your Pokemon can do. It's less than ideal, but that doesn't mean that it will stop you. Right, we had that wonderful player that made it to day 2 of Worlds with only 5 Pokemon. Right? Never let your dreams be crushed by something like math.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and then especially with like GBL play too, you can be sloppy with IVs, and
yeah.
If you have knowledge of breakpoints and you know how to use like the Matrix tool on PvPoke to like see what matchup changes you're having, then there are times where you can change your, big disadvantages into a kind of a cute advantage in a way. Sort of like with that Cophagrigus story I told earlier, where it's like Cophagrigus generally always wants to be high bulk, but I didn't have it, and I noticed that this high attack weighted one could get charge move priority on wall range, so let's see what happens, and then the payoff ended up being pretty huge. It's nothing ideal, or I wouldn't recommend that Cophagrigus to anybody, even at the time, but I saw that there was this little advantage that I could maybe play up, and ended up paying off.
Yeah, 100% agree. So, obviously, we just had new season started. I say huge move shakeup, which is probably a bit of a lie. Like 4 major Pokemon are making big waves, and then there's a bunch of little stuff that isn't making much waves. And we were all expecting there's like here's 400 Pokemon that get grass moves. None of them matter, which was brutal. But so one of the things we wanted to do, and we're going to have you grade us here on how well we swagged out our Skuntank, because Skuntank it's a very much a Silph all-star. It's very good in limited metas, right? Poison dark typing means it's only got a ground weakness, so it's very safe as a swap. Poison jab is a perfectly good move, and it ran Crunch Sludge Bomb, but now it's got Trailblaze on it, which gives it grass coverage and an attack boost, which sounds fascinating, and looks like it could do a lot. I think it's definitely. I built it and ran it for like ranks 10 to 12 just to see how it was going as I was doing my GBL climb. And I do think it's better than with Sludge Bomb. I never felt myself missing Sludge Bomb, even again, because the number one thing you're going to hit with Sludge Bomb is Azumarill, and Trailblaze is just as good on that. So I didn't find myself missing it. The attack buff also is very helpful if you can get to it. I was specifically running it because I was expecting to run into a ton of Carbink. I didn't because I don't. We'll ask you here. Do you think that people have oversold Carbink based on its stats like Araquanid, or people just haven't built them yet because it's a billion XL candy?
I think it's a little bit of both. I mean, anybody sober about Carbink knows that it's just like a better Bastiodon. So it still has like the Bastiodon kind of problems where you're locked into this coverage, so you can get hard countered by stuff. But at the same time, too, people do want to build their big XL ones, and it takes time. I know people that went to Go Fest and then also did the Global Go Fest, and they don't even have over 100 XL candy yet, despite their best efforts, you know? Um, but yeah, I think over time we're going to see more and more Carbink kind of pop up.
Do you think it's a better Blind 3 or Show 6 All Star, in your opinion?
I think it'll perform a lot better in Blind 3. In Show 6, like, a Carbink's going to happen. And, like, sure, you can get to, like, top 8 with a Bastiodon, Like, we saw Caleb Pang do it. And I believe, was it Silent Beast that had the Bastiodon and the Galarian Farfetch'd or Surfetch'd? Anyways, like, you can do well with the Bastiodon, but Bastiodon's got those Bastiodon problems. Metacham or a Swampert gets paired against you, and now you're going to have a bad time. And if you know that you're going to be fighting a Bastiodon, then those, like, neutral matchups, they can kind of play around that a little bit better. Where in GBL, oh, shoot, there's a Bastiodon, and of course Charizard's my last Pokemon, so, you know? So yeah, I think in blinds, Carbink will do a lot better, because if Carbink is stuck against a Swampert or a Metacham in the end game, it still has the Moonblast option to possibly flip that. Mm-hmm. So I'd say GBL for sure, way better Bastiodon. When it comes to the C6 meta, you still have the opportunity to play around it, but I think Carbink will see a lot more play than what Bastiodon has seen in the Play Pokemon Syndicate.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. Good analysis for sure. I would agree with all that. So, nonetheless, that's why we tested out Skuntank. And so, when we look at Skuntank here, I'll let our numbers guy talk us through this, Zacharias.
All right, so Skuntank. Overall on PvPoke, you're looking at a rank under 200. So, like, you don't see it in GBL often. as Thidricker said, we're looking at custom metas. It's about the same bulk as Swampert or Pelipper. It's not super bulky, but it can take a hit. And it's a little bit of a Swiss Army knife, especially now with an extra move. It's a decent spread of coverage you can get with it. So for factions, maybe it's a solid pick. Obviously meta depending, and as was alluded to, getting that attack boost with the poison jab, really, really nice. Be wary of going through the sims and trying to work these things out, because it can be a little hairy with attack boosts. It'll throw in the Trailblaze as a bait, give you a nice attack boost, and then it beats everything. But that's not necessarily going to always swing in your favor. If people know it's coming, they're not going to shield it. Looking at the kind of IV side of things, it does make a pretty hefty difference what wins you're going to get. You can increase your percentage wins by a good chunk, whether you're Shadow or normal Skuntank, because we do have access to both of them, or did at least. I don't know when the last time Shadow Skuntank or Shadow Stunky was out, but I have a fair few of them, so I imagine it was out for a while. Overall, I think from digging into it, I saw that you do really still need defense. HP, I felt like you can suffer a bit of a loss in to give yourself that little bit of an attack boost. And if they want to give Skuntank some more moves, if they give it a faster access charge move, you're going to really get better. So if they gave it Night Slash, it will be a good bit spammier. And if they give it Breaking Swipe, because they're giving everything Breaking Swipe now, it'll be unstoppable. Yeah, it'll be unstoppable. It picks up like 86% of all of the Pokemon wins with Breaking Swipe and Flamethrower.
You hear us, Niantic? Breaking Swipe Skuntank. We need this.
Yeah.
So likely to happen. But kind of getting into the weeds a little bit with it to try and see, where is this kind of breakpoint going to come in? Like, you can talk about giving an attack weight. What does that really mean? So in the style of RyanSwag, I had a bit of a dive into the numbers, and the best thing I found out of the top meta, so looking at the PvPoke top meta, was really defense deoxys, and I've ran into a host of them in GBL this season, and pretty much every season since it was released. So it is a very meta relevant threat. You can completely flip that matchup with enough attack. So in the 0-15-15, so that will be the ideal Skuntank, the rank 1, you mutually KO with the kind of generic defense deoxys. But if you give yourself just a little bit more attack, and that is up to 121.7, or depending on the defense deoxys IVs, you can go up to 122.3 or 123 attack, you will guarantee that your second crunch combined with the poison jabs will KO before it can get to another Thunderbolt.
Yeah. So we filmed this because I've got a breakpoint Skuntank and Zacharias has a non-breakpoint Skuntank. So we can just watch right here. You can see how important the breakpoints are in this matchup. I'm filming both sides, which is why we have Skuntanks facing each other functionally. But no loss fast moves here. We go just straight crunch, no need to bait because crunch is super effective. We had to film this 5 times because we kept getting defense drops, which obviously changes everything. But it just in the
really helps when you get the debuff.
Yeah, the debuff, you're in Christmas land at that stage of the game. But we wanted to show, like, in a regular situation, you can never get the debuff when you need it, but when you're trying to avoid it, there it is. So we throw crunches at the same time here. Yeah, go ahead.
The second crunch you'll see is enough on one side and not enough on the other, and you'll get to the second Thunderbolt from Deoxys. Like if you're using Rock Slide, you're never going to win against Skuntank. If you go for the Psycho Boost, you're not going to win either, because it's only neutral because of the dark typing. So you need those 2 Thunderbolts for the 1 shield, and a small attack boost can completely flip that. So there's a very clear cut case presented for just that little change. So if you're looking for a Stunky to evolve, you can pick your 4-15-15 or your 5-14-15. But yeah, there's a fair amount of spreads that I will, populate onto a list, and you can do this very easily. Access a nice breakpoint, and if you sculpt your Skuntank, you can keep a lot of the general wins. So you want, let's say for Frostlass, you want to have a defense stat of 96 or greater. That's hard to keep with the attack, so you have to sacrifice some HP, but that doesn't necessarily lose you that many matches. So I ended up with the ideal Skuntank, ideal in heavy inverted commas, as a 5-14-15 or a possible 6-14-13. And yeah, like I mentioned earlier, if you get a Trailblaze as a bait effectively against almost anything, you can flip the matchups, because the second, or the crunch you throw at the end that doesn't get shielded just nukes things. So Sableye, Medicham, Dunsparce and Mantine all get flipped by using Trailblaze to boost your crunch to end the game. So yeah, there's my homage to RyanSwag.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, other cool things with having like a 122.3 attack stat on the Skuntank. If you're up against like a high bulk Drapion, you can flip the 0/0 with that. And then you also get a crunch breakpoint on a high bulk Noctowl, which can enable the 2/1 shield scenario. And then the heck is this? Oh, Trailblaze, yeah. And then you can also get a Trailblaze breakpoint, like the charge move itself, to take down a Shadow, Charmalola, Ninetales in the 0/0 shield situation. So if you happen to fight the rank 1 Shadow, Alolan, Ninetales specifically, well, just know with a little bit of attack, you kind of got that a little bit more on lock.
Our long-term plan.
I guess if I were to grade,
oh yeah, 122.3 breakpoint. We all know that one's great for. I'm just perfect. I love your numbers knowledge.
Right. I guess if I were grading this, something I would take some points off for, some marks. You should have taken this to the writing center in the library. Is for the Deoxys, to get that consistently, you'd want like 124.06. So to cover the, what is it, like the 10-15-15 or whatever specifically.
Right.
And one thing that's kind of interesting about it too is that, so that's for the crunch breakpoint, and then that's also like the fast move breakpoint. It ends up being the same number. But yeah, so having a little bit more attack would be good for that consistency. But if you do go for that higher attack weight, well, then you've got less defense and or HP to work with. So like the 8-14-8 would have that 124 attack. It would have the same 94.5 defense, but then we'd be, 4 HP lower, which could cause us problems in like, I don't know, the Trevenant 0/1 shield scenario, maybe some Registeel situations, and then just the lower defense in general could cause problems against Umbreon and Frostlass. So there are trade-offs. So it's like you've got the likelihood where it's like against any sort of possible Deoxys IV spread, the 122.3 could do the job. But if they cross that level of defense where it no longer does the job, well, then you're not doing that job. But on the flip side, you still do got that higher bulk to work with in other matchups. So it's like, I don't know, one of those things where you kind of have to know what you can and can't do in battle. So I guess if you were to run like the 5-14-5, and you were fighting a Deoxys, and you notice that, I don't know, so many fast moves in, they're not in the yellow yet. It's like, oh, it's one of those high defense ones. And then you can adjust accordingly. Where if you're up against a Deoxys and they're not used to fighting attack weighted skunk tank, they might not know to adjust based on you having a higher attack weight if you were to be getting the breakpoint. So just having the full spectrum knowledge can help out in battle. So
yeah. And I think that's really important. Is that's kind of one of the big things is you need to know what your Pokemon can do, right? Because we built a skunk tank to best handle Defense Deoxys, which is our spherical cows in a vacuum, right? You have to say, okay, well, I know that my skunk tank will handle this, and I know it will now lose this, so I have to adjust accordingly. And my opponent probably doesn't know that I can do that. So then we get the I know that he knows that I know mirror match games going on as well, like our Metacham Slayer being brought in. But yeah, no, that's really interesting and really great breakpoints to think about. And it's like when I was building my team for Orlando, I was like, all right, there's going to be a lot of Charizards, a lot of Metachams. There were not a lot of Charizards, but man, was I convinced they were going to be. And so I brought, if I got a bait with Macargo and landed overheat, it beat Metacham because it hit a defense breakpoint that it would live long enough. So I built one that would handle Charizard, Altaria, and Metacham in a less than ideal Metacham situation, but for my other Macargo, it was a never going to happen situation. And so kind of knowing what are my stronger and my weaker matchups accordingly is really important, and one of those things you have to know how to play to is, and you mentioned something that I know I'm terrible at, adjusting. Like I know we should have a feel for where a Pokemon's HP should be based on the number of fast attacks we usually do to whatever the countermon will be. And having the situational awareness to realize, oh, they're way higher than they should be. That means they're defense weighted. So I probably don't need to shield this, but I do need to get out of here after they empty their energy or whatever. I think is really an important point.
yeah, I've definitely had matchups in GBL where I'm expecting to get the attack break point, and like I noticed that like their HP isn't going down fast enough, and it's like, oh, of course, I'm fighting the one that has like this wacky high defense, you know. Um, and then I guess on the flip side too, I remember when I belted out my high defense Lantern in GBL, it gets a defense break point against Altaria, which makes the matchup like way more manageable for Lantern. And I remember like I could feel it, you know, I could feel it across the universe. You know, my opponent just having this moment like, why isn't the Lantern dead yet? They should be dead by now. But here it is with like a third of its health left, and it's like, yeah, it's some breakpoints for you, baby.
Yeah, I actually, when I was climbing Go Battle League, I think 2 seasons ago, I used non-XL Azumarill specifically as a counter Azumarill safe swap because no one expects you to be running a non-XL Azumarill. You win all CMPs and your damage breakpoints are so much higher than the XL one. So I was like, my Azumarill answer is better Azumarill. And no one ever plans for such a ridiculous, like the stats, it's like the high attack Carbink is such a different mon than the quote unquote more ideal IVs. And being aware of that's really important, I think. So as we talk about IVs, when you're playing, you're like, oh, I usually win this CMP, but I'm doing a lot more damage with fast moves, which means they're probably attack weighted, so I need to be careful here. Got to watch out for the SwagTips maneuver, as we're going to start calling it. We're going to make that canon now. But yeah, knowing your Pokemon trade-offs, right? Because again, we're kind of trying to balance a perfect scale between our three stats: attack, defense, and HP. And there's always going to be some give there. And kind of what works best for you is also one of those important things. It's like the Metacham Slayer in the mirrors. It's what its Axon wanted because he knew he'd feel very comfortable going in to the mirror matchup as well as doing normal Metacham things against a lot of other stuff. So that's really fascinating. And then I'll just real quick. Another example is I have 5 jump luff built because I love jump luff, and I have a 115 tin jump luff because it picks up the Altaria pre sky attack. Post sky attack, all of them can beat the default Altaria now because it just doesn't get, the dragon breath damage isn't enough, and it doesn't get to the second sky attack fast enough. But pre nerf, jump bluff could survive one, shield one, survive one, and get to third acrobatics and claim the win. And so I was like, okay, I've got a grass type that beats a flyer. That's important. And then I chickened out because I expected there to be tons of wall rains, and instead there were tons of Azumarill, which still isn't great because Azumarill is always going to get the ice beam off. But I'm looking back and I'm just like, man, why did I bring my cargo?
Yeah, it's hard to predict these things.
Yeah, that's the real issue and like when I looked at the top 16 players of Orlando, I was like, oh, my team actually lines up really well against them. But that's always the risk of playing an anti-meta team, is you first have to win your way into the dominant meta, because at those opening levels, who knows what you're going to end up going against. And whereas those meta teams are so diverse and flexible that they consistently can get to the top, and then the players obviously are also phenomenal. I'm not acting like they're coasting because they're playing meta, but it's much easier with a meta team to play against off the wall teams than an anti-meta team, which doesn't have as much broad coverage, is my experience.
Yeah, it can be tough. Like, one thing that kind of eats at me a little bit is I think like the top 8 teams at NAIC were all pretty vulnerable to my boy Dedenne, but my first match in the losers bracket was against the one Maverick in this Charizard riddled tournament to bring a Meganium. And like I had plans for like Venusaur. I could get around Venusaur, but Meganium, come on, man. Like,
yeah.
I'm trying to galaxy brain this. I didn't even bring a flyer because I figured Venusaur would be the only grass I'd see, and well, poor Dedenne got knocked out that day. So
yeah, that's the brutal thing. It's like, how do I plan for Meganium? Hasn't been top meta. Let me just look real quick and see how many Meganiums made it in the top 8. Period. Because obviously, like when we look at the top meta and we build for how we think it's going to play and adjust. So last year's seasons. I don't see any that made top 8 or top 16. There are a few that registered and brought Meganiums. And it looks like, were you against PDA Plant and NAIC?
that might be it.
Yeah, it was Altaria.
Yeah. That's the one.
That is the only registered Meganium at NAIC.
I got a conspiracy theory. This isn't real. This is just me fun, so don't take what I'm about to say as me being serious. But I think that player didn't get to play day 1 because they didn't register their team in time. I bet they saw RyanSwag was in their bracket, and they're like, RyanSwag surely is bringing that Dedenne. So they're like, I'm gonna quick run Galarian, Stunfisk, and Meganium instead of Registeel and Sableye or something just to get him. Surely that's what happened.
I believe it. That is canon now. And PDA Plan, if you end up watching this, please confirm for us that was your entire intention, was knocking out RyanSwag.
PDA Plan, isn't it like, I thought it was PED. I don't remember specifically. Anyways, plant player, the Meganium. I almost got them, but in game 3, if I recall correctly, like I have a attack weighted Metacham. It's not like a Slayer build, but it's higher attack than what most people would run on their Metacham. And it wasn't even like, it's just the best one I had at the time. I'd surely like to build all their Metacham, but so I was so used to getting charge move priority that I took her Metacham to charge move priority, and I threw a Psychic, and then I lost the CMP. And I could have thrown the Psychic earlier, and I probably would have won our 3rd fight. But the moment the CMP tie wasn't me, I was like, oh, you just flew too close to the sun there, RyanSwag. Come on, man. So that was, yeah, scouting out what kind of stats your opponent has. Like if I noticed that we had a CMP tie earlier in the game, then I wouldn't have had such a disturbing fate. But unfortunately, I was unaware that they had a higher attack weight. Uh,
We've talked
this
a lot
was
about losing these attack weights and losing CMPs, but man, I feel that I've been in that situation because
this was
I was
PD
just
plan was totally the hitman.
yeah, it makes sense. I buy it. Since I always run 1,500 Pokemon, that means I'm usually more attack weighted than most Pokemon because I don't have ideal spreads. And so I usually am just like, I'm going to win CMP. And 9 times out of 10, I definitely win CMP with my Sableye, with my Medicham. And so I just take it for granted. And then when I lose it, I'm like, where have I gone wrong? And you're just like, oh, I lost the entire match because I was like, oh, surely I win CMP. So I feel that pain. And just real quick shout out to Green BV. That's where I'm getting all these stats of who played Meganium. Green BV on Twitter does a great job of consolidating every registered team and showing what the meta is, which is what I use to build, and then lets you search. So you can search up your favorite players' teams and kind of work from there. But yeah, it's important to know your builds. It's important to know your CMPs. And I feel like in a best of 3, if there's a CMP you're worried about, you should almost try and force it game 1 just so that it doesn't come back to bite you in game 2 or game 3. Because I know I've had that happen. But I also know that I specifically fished for it in factions before in game 1 so that I could adjust and play. I think it happens most often with Medicham and Noctowl were the big ones that it was happening all the time with in the play Pokemon events. But it's definitely, I mean, when you have a Silph meta or a factions meta, the amount of times that you get into mirror matchups is astronomically higher because it's narrower. And kind of learning that game 1, I find to be very helpful.
Absolutely. I think, especially for things like you say, factions, where every point counts, it's not even just about winning then the match. It's about kind of understanding how to maximize, like getting that 2 points versus getting 1 point can mean the whole team wins or loses.
And another thing to add in with factions as well is when I was doing my Frostlass PvP IV deep dive, with the play Pokemon events, usually I'll reach out to players that have used the Pokemon to get their insight. So it's not just numbers man giving you his magic fake numbers. It's like this pro player actually used these magic numbers. And so normally I'd like shout the players out that I talk to, but a lot of the Frostlass players were factions players, and they're just like, just don't put my name on it. I don't want anybody knowing anything about my
Mm.
Frostlass. Like, because especially with the Frostlass mirror, it can get really tedious based on your HP and your attack weight. Like, there's a Goldilocks zone, but if your opponent knows you're in that Goldilocks zone, then they can adjust to that ahead of time. So yeah, like scouting your opponent is, at least it appears to be a big thing in factions.
Oh, for sure. It really is. And gym breakers as well, because of the whole sharing. Like, I play somebody, my teammate plays the same person, so whoever goes first takes notes and comes back and says, "This is what happened. This is the CMB that I lost," or whatever.
Which is one of the fun parts about team play, especially, right? Like, because you're all working together as a team, you're kind of sharing stats, and I'm sure there's some unofficial teams going on at these larger events as well that are chatting with each other. We know people train together, but I'm sure someone's like, "Oh, I lost CMP." That means that they've got to have a 6 attack there, otherwise it's not going to
Mm.
happen. But it's always I love that team play, both in factions and in gym breakers, where you can really um, the second player can completely adapt based on how they saw those mirror matchups or those breakpoint matchups play out, and it can make a huge deal. All the more reason for everyone to pay super close attention to their IVs, I think.
Hmm.
I guess the fortunate thing with GBL play is all you really have to know is your 3 Pokemon and what happens with them. Where
Yeah,
with the play Pokemon Syndicate and factions, gym breakers, it's like, oh man, so many variables.
Yeah, because they may be running entirely wild move sets because of the limited meta. All of those things can really just. I like it because I get very bored running the same three Pokemon. I don't think I've ever been able to play the same team in Great League for more than like 2 days. Just because I'm like, okay, I can't do any more Medicham, or I can't do any more. Um, I never get tired of Heliolisk, but the other new ones, I'm like, oh, this is too much for me. That's why I really like factions limited metas, because I'm always powering something stupid up new, and it's a lot of fun that way. And I think that, again, in the show 6, whether it be factions or play Pokemon, that's especially where these IVs are going to matter, because there's no way to predict whether or not the person you're playing in Go Battle League is someone who's grinded for a very good IV one, or someone who's just like, yep, Shadow Grand Bull, doesn't matter what the IVs are, I'm just going to double shield charm and then close combat when it dies. Right? There's a lot less kind of these mind games that we play with IVs and breakpoints there, I think.
It's part of the struggle every GBL season, the first 15 ranks. Like, oh, I'm in the chaos territory. What am I going to be running into today? Is it going to be triple steel?
2200s. I feel like on ELO, like 22 to 2300 is just the nightmare zone, where half of the players are running super meta and half of the players are running as spicy as possible. And if you happen to get one batch of them in a group of 5, it will just kill your set and you'll be stuck there forever. Do you feel that way?
Oh yeah. It's like, oh, we're running 3 flyers today, and what the hell?
How was I supposed to predict a triple steel team? Like, what am I supposed to do with this?
Exactly.
That's when I feel like phone smashing is when it's not like, if I lose to a good player, I lose to a good player. We've all been there. I understand. I got outplayed. When I lose because they're like, nobody expects Melmetal, Registeel, and Bastiodon, and you're just like, well, no, because that would be ridiculous. And so I just killed the first steel and thought I was fine, because you lose to every meta team, and you're just like, how am I losing to this? And I mean, that's the fun of.
I pull out my Shadow Quagsire, and I'm like, yes, this is going to be my day. My first team I run into is Grottle, Venusaur, Victory Bell, all Razor Leaf. I'm like, why? Why would anybody do that? You're going to lose to almost everything you face, except me. You're just going to beat the hell out of me and my terrible non-grass countering team.
Yeah, I had someone running a triple flyer team, and they met my Heliolisk lead, and I was just like, oh, this is. I got to experience the bliss of one single Pokemon beating all 3 of theirs, and it felt amazing. But it's happened equally where it's like, oh, great, a triple fighter team. Well, guess we're not going to get through all of them.
Yeah.
I don't remember what the team comp was, but I had a battle like a couple days ago where I led Medicham, and then Medicham just beat their entire team. And I was like, how are you in GBL and you're not even remotely prepared for Medicham in the slightest? Like, I didn't swap. I did spend shields, but like, it was just like, it wasn't even power up punch Medicham. It was just straight ice punch psychic Medicham. And it was just like, I think I psychicked something that could maybe beat Medicham, but they no shielded it for whatever reason they had to do that, despite being hella weak to Medicham. And I was like, well, okay, I guess I win.
Yeah, it's like, I understand you not remembering that Gudra has Draco Meteor, but not being prepared to handle a Medicham. I don't understand why you're climbing in Great League at the moment. Yeah, that's wild. All right. Well, I think we've done a great job here. I mean, we didn't. You gave us a C on our Scum Tank evaluation, but
Well, I'd give it a solid B.
Okay.
Solid B. We'll accept that.
Yeah.
As they say, B's get degrees.
Hell
which I
yeah.
can't, as a school administrator, I cannot support. Get those A's.
Wait,
get those
no.
scholarship.
B's don't get degrees, man. C's get degrees.
Yeah.
Students, don't listen to this advice. Try your hardest.
No, absolutely.
School mantra.
Nice.
Yeah, but I think showing our approach, one, I think we hit some important topics, but two, it also shows genuinely the real value of what you're providing with your videos. Is like you instantly were able to say, okay, that's good, but we need to think about this. And so that's why your videos are so helpful, why we're so glad that we've got them so that we don't have to wade this deep with all of our big meta Pokemon. But also show that, at least to start, when you're kind of playing around with what's your favorite Pokemon and what do you want to build a team with, some nice ground level approaches before you really start going into the frantic IV deep dives. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's fascinating hearing you talk about this stuff, and really gives us some good insight into kind of the importance and all the key things that can affect IVs and why they really can matter a lot, especially with once we get to the top tier of competitive Pokemon, why it really starts mattering even more then, because even these little things like knowing to adjust because you're going to lose CMP based on the damage their Pokemon is taking, is 100% something a top level player is doing, and is 100% something I am not doing yet. But it's something you should be doing if you want to be competing at the top level. So thank you so much for coming and hanging out with us and chatting. We had a great time. Links below to all of your socials and your YouTube channel. If you have any shout outs you want to do, now anyone to thank, please feel free.
Yeah, well, thank you guys both for having me on the podcast here. It's definitely a pleasure to talk about PvP IVs with y'all. I don't know if I got any particular shout outs though.
Well,
I know that there is
wife, so we had to throw that one.
Yeah, can't shout her out. I guess I could give a shout out to Tho Technical. I know he's got a pretty good PvP IV like battle matrix, like how-to kind of video out there. I can't remember what it's specifically called, but if you guys find it, if you want to link it down below for people, that could be helpful. Not like the full deep dive kind of perspective, but just getting your feet wet with what you kind of need to know as a player to get ahead with what you actually have. I think he's got a pretty good video out on that one.
Perfect. Yeah, we'll make sure to link it below.
Sweet.
All right. Well, thank you so very much. And we will, are you coming to Orlando this year?
I hope to.
Okay. Well, my daughter and I are planning to do at least, I think, Orlando and Charlotte in our area. So hopefully we'll get to see you in person again and catch up. But good luck with all of your regional qualifiers this year. We're going to get Daginn to Worlds.
Yeah.
I believe it's going to happen.
We got this thing called Gligar and this other thing called Steelix, and they both make people really want to use Swampert and Quagsire. So
yeah, I know.
They could have gave Dedenne Trailblaze. Dedenne learns it.
Yeah.
But how did they not give? Like, everyone got Trailblaze. I think that would have been really interesting. They could have at least given it Volt Switch as well. Give it something to work with.
I think I just complain about Niantic too much. So they're gonna do it, and they're like, wait a minute, that's RyanSwag's favorite Pokemon. That guy.
Niantic employee Pedia Plant, Meganium lover is like, no, stop it all. All right. Well, thank you so much, and we will see you around. Once again, this is RyanSwag with us. I am Thithrecker, and our host as always,
Zacharias. Lovely to talk to you.
Nice meeting you guys again.
Thanks.
Till we meet again.
Yeah, thanks.
Catch
and
you.
we will catch you all on the next episode.